My mother-in-law casually broke the news to my stunned self. We're going to be living together now. We just remodeled it into a duplex for convenience. The property is in your name, right, Emma? Sorry to bother you, but could you please cover the $80,000 remodeling bill? My mother-in-law and husband laughed triumphantly. Witnessing this, I, filled with resolve, was about to confront them with the truth that even my husband didn't know, along with the evidence. I am Emma Davis, 26 years old. I live a bit away from the downtown, in a nature-rich area, and work an office job while drawing illustrations as a hobby. Lately, I enjoy uploading my drawings on social media and reading the comments on them daily. I have a husband who is 3 years older than me, and we're enjoying our married life in a favorite old farmhouse that we bought right after our wedding. But there has been a visitor to this house once a month since we got married, who always gives me a headache. Emma! Emma! I'm here! Please open up quickly! Hearing the persistent banging on the sliding front door, I rushed to it. Ah, mother-in-law! I'll open it right away. Even though there's a perfectly good doorbell right next to the door. I try to make a smile and open the sliding door. There are so many bugs around here. It's so annoying. Is George still at work? Poor thing, even on Saturday. Oh, I brought some of his favorite food. I see a woman holding a large bag, looking tired from waiting beyond the door. While dealing with her rapid-fire chatter, I paced on a fake smile. The once-a-month visitor is my husband's mother, that is, my mother-in-law. My husband being an only child, she insists on taking care of him even after our marriage, and to my gratitude, she even instructs me on house chores. The last time she came to our house, she rearranged all the food in the fridge, and I had to start the next day's breakfast preparation from hunting down the ingredients. I recall my husband repeatedly telling me before we got married, if my parents ever need care, we'll live together. I want you to understand that. I'm disappointed to think I might have to give up this beloved old house when the time comes, but I've come to accept it. What bothers me more is the thought of living with this mother-in-law 24/7. Sorry for my husband. It fills me with a bit of gloom. Fast forward 2 years into our farmhouse married life. I heard my husband that my father-in-law had slipped on the stairs at home and broke his leg. They will need our help from now on. Let's live together, just as we discussed before our marriage. Yes, I'm worried too, so I think it's a good idea. Can I continue my drawing hobby? I was worried about my father-in-law's health, so I agreed without hesitation to move in together. However, I was anxious that being caught up in housework and taking care of my in-laws might rob me of the time for my hobby of drawing. Whether he was aware of my anxiety or not, my husband just said, I want you to prioritize the house, and left the room, headed to his office. Being left alone in my room, I felt like I had half given up on my selfish husband. While looking back at the illustrations I had drawn up until now, one by one, I began to sort out my feelings. Just as I had made up my mind to live with them, an unexpected event occurred. While I was working as usual at my workplace, I suddenly felt numbness in my hands and feet and was instantly overwhelmed by intense dizziness and collapsed. Thanks to a colleague who immediately called an ambulance, my life was not in danger, but it turned out to be a stroke at a young age after medical examination. Although I had been pointed out high blood pressure in health checks before, I regretted neglecting it without going to the hospital. Including detailed examination, surgery, and rehabilitation, the hospitalization period turned out to be about 2 months. From the discovery of the disease to the hospitalization progressed at a brisk pace, and she realizes that her husband has given her very little concern. After being diagnosed with a stroke at a young age, I took out my phone with trembling hands and called my husband right away. The only thing I could hear from the phone was a disappointing voice saying, I see, so the living together will be postponed, huh? I couldn't respond to the fact that he was worried about the future life at my in-laws' house, not about my body. Since my father-in-law is still in the hospital with a fracture, there was no need to worry about caregiving, which was a blessing in disguise that I could focus on treatment. Also, since we don't have children, there's no need to worry about that. Suddenly, the face of my mother-in-law, who always says, "I want to see my grandchild's face soon," every time we meet, pops up, and as if to shake it off, I picked up the sketchbook nearby. Recently, I've been too busy preparing to live with my in-laws and going through examinations since I collapsed to have time for my favorite illustrations. Once I start living with my in-laws, I'll probably lose even more time to draw. I decided to think of this hospitalization period as the last free time that God has given me, and decided to fully enjoy my hobby. When this period is over, I decided in my heart to do my best for my husband and in-laws, whether it's housework or anything else. The 2-month hospital stay ended in a flash, and finally, the day of discharge. My husband casually asked if he should come to pick me up, but I wanted to spend some time alone until I got home, so I declined, feeling a bit guilty. While I was in the bus, I saw the familiar landscape outside the window and realized that I was already near home. The sunlight hitting the beautiful green leaves was dazzlingly sparkling, making me feel indescribable as I thought, this is goodbye to this rich, natural place. Since my in-laws' house is located relatively close to the city center, my life will change drastically from now on. Feeling a little lonely, I slowly got off the bus at the familiar bus stop. As I was heading towards my soon-to-be farewell home, I suddenly stopped in my tracks at the sight that appeared before me. There was supposed to be my favorite old private house here, but instead, there was a house I had never seen before. Since I had been in the hospital for about 2 months, I checked the position of the surrounding buildings and the way I came, wondering if I had mistaken the location. But it was not a mistake after all. There's no use wandering around, so I timidly pressed the intercom of the house. Then a familiar voice said, "Yes." The voice was undoubtedly my husband. Still feeling confused, I quietly answered, "It's Michelle," to the intercom. The front door creaked open, and my husband in his casual attire came out. "Ah, welcome home. You came home earlier than I expected. I had the day off today. I could have picked you up." "George, what happened to our house? Why has it changed so much?" I interrupted my husband, who seemed relaxed, maybe just woke up, his hair mist, to ask my question with a sense of disbelief. However, disregarding my anxiousness, George only responded with a vague, "Huh? What's up? What happened?" without intending to answer my question. Just then, I heard laughter coming from inside the house. Thinking it couldn't be, I pushed past my husband and headed toward the living room. When I opened the unfamiliar door leading to the living room, I saw my mother-in-law lying on the couch watching TV. She was clutching her stomach and laughing while watching the TV screen. "Why is my mother-in-law in this house?" "Oh, Michelle, welcome back. Hospital stays can be long, but don't worry. I took care of the house while you were gone." I wonder what this house stuff my mother-in-law is talking about. Could it be chores? Or, with an overwhelming bad feeling, I pressed my mother-in-law on why the old house had changed so much. Without showing any sign of guilt, she blurted out, "Well, we're all going to live together, right? So I just remodeled it into a duplex to make it more comfortable." The phrase, "just remodeled it into a duplex," kept replaying in my mind. My mother-in-law was always the type to interfere with our life, but I never expected her to remodel our house without permission. Moreover, weren't we supposed to start living together in my in-laws' house, which is closer to the city center? Every time my mother-in-law visited the old house here, she used to complain about the bugs and the short walk from the station. Despite that, why? "A lot of things have changed. Oh, and there's something else important I have to tell you." Turning off the TV she had been watching, my mother-in-law whispered to me with a grin, "The remodeling cost a bit. I believe the title to this house is under your name, Michelle. I'm sorry, but could you handle the payment?" Chuckles, not a hint of apology in them, my mother-in-law said, it's $80,000. And her smile deepened. Remodeling cost? The title to this house? $80,000? The unexpected words felt like a punch to the head, and I felt my legs are shaking. I can't even find the words to reply. While I was staring at her, mother-in-law, who was stunned and laughing fearlessly, my husband, who was at the entrance, opened the living room door and sneaked in. The moment I saw him, my feet naturally headed towards him, holding a faint hope that he would surely be on my side. I relayed to my husband exactly what my mother-in-law had said, clinging to a desperate hope for his reaction. But all I received from him was a cold response. "Well, that's about right. Take care of it, will you?" That's right. That's the kind of man he is. When I collapsed from a stroke, he was more concerned about our living arrangements than my health. He's a man who will stop if his mother says green means stop, and will go if she says red means go. A man who always thinks his mother is right. The discomfort and dissatisfaction I'd felt toward my husband escalate once it flooded. I was done. I thought from the bottom of my heart, I would throw this family. "I understand now, George. I am going to divorce you. And mother-in-law? No, Cecilia, please handle the renovation costs on your own." After declaring this all at once, I turned my back on them and moved to leave the room as quickly as possible. But it seemed they weren't going to let me go so easily. "I've been losing interest in you anyway, so it's no big deal. But remember, this house is in your name, Emma, so you have a responsibility to pay." "That's right. Feel free to leave, but please settle your dues first." I was astonished at the two of them who selfishly made their claims. I cannot help but let out a sigh. Surely, if I turned around, I'd see their smug faces grinning in victory. I refused to look back, standing tall as I replied, "You keep saying the house is in my name, George, but did you forget? The ownership has been transferred to you." I revealed the truth. However, they only laughed at me and believed I was lying, just to avoid paying. That's when I brought up how George had asked me to change the property's ownership when we got married, as he didn't want the house to be in his wife's name for appearance's sake. Since I didn't particularly care about the property title, I had immediately transferred it to his name. Upon hearing this, the laughter of the two who had been so complacent until now abruptly stopped, and I could feel the panic gradually setting in. "I don't recall saying such a thing. There's no proof anyway." Anticipating this response, I turned back to face them, walked past them, and opened a drawer of a shelf from our old house. Let's see. It should be somewhere around... here it is. This is the proof. I took out a document from the drawer where the property and the house ownership were listed and showed it in front of their faces. When I carefully pointed to the part that said the ownership was in George's name, my husband's face turned pale. "That's fraud. I never thought you'd actually do it, and I definitely can't pay such a huge sum of $80,000. I was disgusted with my husband, who started yelling as soon as he realized the payment obligation was on him. "Since a decent conversation seems impossible, let's communicate through lawyers from now on. Cecilia, your son seems to be in quite a pickle, so please take good care of him from now on." Beside my loud husband, I smiled at my mother-in-law, who was standing dazedly, and finally turned my back on them, leaving their home for good. After that, my husband called several times, but I chose to ignore him entirely, decide to communicate formally through a lawyer. Given our already strained relationship and problems with my mother-in-law, the divorce was settled without any issues. In addition, regarding the matter that my husband insistently shouted when he left, "Change of name is a fraud," was decided that there was an agreement between us because it was changed when they got married 2 years ago. My lawyer assured me with a smile that this is neither fraud nor anything illegal. With that, all the uncertainty inside me was completely dispelled. It seemed that the cost of renovating that house was supposed to be paid in full by me as soon as I got discharged from the hospital. Wanting to applaud, I now appreciate the well-crafted, spiteful act of pushing me into hell just after I had endured surgery and rehabilitation and finally got discharged due to illness. In the end, since the house was in my husband's name, it was his duty to make the lump sum payment, and he ended up strangling himself. In addition, I was able to secure alimony after the successful divorce. My husband, who had been hit with a claim for a total amount that he could not possibly pay off, had either borrowed money from dangerous places or hadn't. While I was fighting with my husband and mother-in-law, I received an apology from my father-in-law, Bob, who had been hospitalized with a broken leg, saying, "I'm sorry for my wife and son's behavior." Of course, it didn't seem that Bob was involved in this matter. However, there's no denying that for 2 years after our marriage, he had ignored his wife and my cold husband. After replying briefly to Bob's message, I decided to cut all ties with that family and start a new life. Since then, my health has gradually improved, and I was able to return to work. When I was married, I used to draw illustrations while being mindful of my husband's gaze, but now I can immerse myself in it as much as I want, whenever I want. Originally, I was just drawing as a hobby, but now I get job offers from the social networking site where I post my illustrations, and I now spend more time drawing for work than for pleasure. Now I'm heading to see an old farmhouse in a somewhat rural town. My current dream is to buy this old farmhouse with the alimony from my husband and my savings, and to open an art studio. Today, I'm about to take the first step towards this dream. On the bus, as I gazed out at the scenery, I found myself recalling that day. The day I left the hospital changed my life forever. The abundant natural scenery outside is the same as that day, but my feelings are clear, and I'm excited about the new life that's about to begin. The leaves on the trees, illuminated by the sunlight, look so bright that they dazzled.
Emma dear, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I won't be attending your wedding today. I mean, it's a waste to give a card to a wedding like yours. I bet it's not even going to be a grand ceremony. My brother's wife ridiculed me over the phone, and all I could muster was a weak, uh-huh. She probably thought that I would beg her to attend, as she had a nasty character. However, I had no intention of doing that, because my name is Emma. I've been dating my fiancé Noah for 5 years, and we've decided to get married. We both lived alone, but our homes were close, so we've been semi-living together for quite some time. Life won't change much after marriage, so we could get married with peace of mind. Noah's parents are lovely people, and they've been caring for me even before the marriage. When I visit my in-laws, they cook meals that cater more to my taste than Noah's, indicating how well I get along with them. Noah gets along well with my parents as well. I was worried if the introverted and shy William would get along with Noah, but surprisingly, they shared common hobbies. Both love fishing, and they have such a great relationship that they go fishing together. When I returned home, William would show a disappointed expression, asking, "Isn't Noah coming this time?" Our relatives get along well, and they are decent people, so I wanted to believe that this marriage would work. But there was one problem. My brother's wife is of an appalling character. Alex, my older brother by 3 years, was a decent person until he got married. He was hardworking and never caused any major trouble, a completely normal guy. But his choice of a marriage partner was not the best. He got married at the age of 28 to a woman 5 years his junior. She was the type who wore flashy clothing with a lot of skin exposed, and I couldn't believe that she was the woman Alex, who was as earnest as they come, would choose. This woman, Mia, was already pregnant when her marriage to Alex was decided. In other words, it was a shotgun marriage. We were shocked at Alex's sudden marriage, but as it was his decision, we as a family could not deny it. We accepted Mia, but her attitude was terrible. When she came to our family home and Sarah served her a meal, she would say, "I'm a picky eater and can't do vegetables," and wouldn't eat half of it. Seeing me, she would point and laugh. "Emma, you're super plain. There's no way you're getting married with that look." At first, Alex admonished Mia, but after a while, it seemed like he gave up. After their child was born, Mia didn't seem to care much about child care, and Alex was almost single-handedly raising the child, using his parental leave. Mia went out to play every night, but Alex forgave her, saying, "Mia is still young." From my perspective, I couldn't understand why Alex could tolerate such a lifestyle, but Alex always smiled peacefully and said, "As long as the child is happy, that's all that matters." When the child of Alex and Mia turned 5, Noah and I decided to get married. My parents were obviously thrilled, but I dreaded reporting the news to my brother and his wife. Mia loved to look down on me, so it was clear that she would have something to say. Steeling myself, I called Alex, who genuinely congratulated me on my marriage. After hanging up the phone, Alex must have reported my marriage to Mia. Immediately, I received a mocking text from Mia. "It's good that you're not getting dumped after dating for such a long time. You're already 30, an old maid, so you'd be seriously in trouble if you didn't get married now. You're lucky to find a buyer before your sell-by date." Mia's message left me more baffled than angry, but having told her, I let it go. I'd informed Alex about the wedding, and since Mia wasn't ranting about it, I figured she respected our decision. When I told Noah we'd communicated our wedding plans to his brother and sister-in-law, relief spread over his face. Noah had met the couple before, and his first experience was Mia saying, "Wow, you're so out of touch. Who dresses like that these days? But I guess you match Emma in your blandness." Mia just loved to assert her superiority. She had criticized Noah's completely normal attire. "Did I embarrass you with my shabby look, Emma? I'm sorry." Noah apologized, looking downcast. To cheer him up, I joked, "Your clothes are perfectly fine. If anything, Mia's scantily clad style is what's shabby. She's almost in her late 20s, you know." Noah smiled again. Mia, who got married in her early 20s, was now approaching her mid-20s, but she dressed in such a way that left nothing to the imagination. There was no hint of maturity about her. Seeing her shoddy appearance, it was hard to believe that she was the wife of Alex, who was dedicated and always put their child first. I felt indignant that Mia had insulted Noah, my beloved. That's why Noah and I had made a decision about our wedding. When we told Alex, he said, "I got it. I'll tell Mia." Since Mia didn't complain about our decision, we thought everything would be okay. Until Mia called on the wedding day. We were all set, dressed, and made up, just waiting for the ceremony to start. As Noah and I were chatting pleasantly with our parents, my phone rang. I had forgotten to mute my phone, which was stashed in the waiting room with our belongings. As I quickly grabbed it, I saw Mia's heavily filtered avatar on the screen. A call from Mia on my wedding day was ominous, but I answered, "Hello? Emma, sorry to be a bother, but I won't be attending your wedding today. It'd be a waste to give you a gift for such an insignificant wedding." I couldn't help sighing at Mia's condescending tone. Alex had said he would tell Mia, but had she forgotten? She didn't seem to know about the decision Noah and I had made when we planned our wedding. "Okay, but just so you know, we didn't invite you or Alex to our wedding." Mia must have been expecting me to beg her to attend because she was a family member. The surprise in my response seemed to baffle Mia, and a sharp gasp came from the other end of the phone. "Alex should have told you. We decided not to invite you and Alex to our wedding. We thought it might be hard on you, with a child and all." Of course, that was just a polite excuse. Mia has a poor tolerance for alcohol, and we were afraid she might cause a scene at the reception. That's the real reason we didn't invite her. We were honest with Alex about the real reason, and that Noah and I didn't have a high opinion of Mia. Alex knew our families weren't fond of Mia, so he accepted our decision without a fuss. But now Mia is acting as if she didn't know, which was perplexing. In the midst of my confusion, Mia blurted out, "How could you not invite your brother and sister-in-law to your wedding? Don't you realize how rude that is?" We knew it was rude, but it was a tough decision we had to make. Unable to tell Mia outright that we didn't invite her because we disliked her, I was left stammering. Then she said, "Just you wait," and hung up. My face paled as I talked to Mia, and Noah became extremely worried about me. When we told Noah and my parents about the call from Mia, They too were taken aback. But then, Sarah, remembering that it was a day of celebration, said brightly, "Let's forget about Mia for today and enjoy the wedding." With that, the atmosphere lightened. That's right, there's no point in worrying about Mia. Today was about Noah and me. I had to hold myself together. Bolstered by Sarah's words, we managed to carry on with the wedding ceremony. After the sacred ceremony at the chapel, we moved to a large hall for the reception. As we made our entrance to the reception hall, to the tune we'd chosen beforehand, our friends complimented us on our appearance. It felt great. The introduction of the bride and groom, the cake cutting, everything was going smoothly until it was time for me to read a letter to our parents. Then the doors of the reception hall swung open. Everyone's eyes were on Mia. She was wearing a flamboyant dress. Her hair was done up, but Alex, looking pale behind her, was inexplicably dressed in a t-shirt and jeans. As the audience murmured, wondering if it was some kind of surprise, Mia grabbed a wine glass from a table and downed a glass of sparkling wine in one go. Then she glared at me and yelled, "I've never seen a more outrageous wedding! This is the worst of the worst! After all, the bride didn't even invite her brother and sister-in-law!" This wasn't a surprise performance. As the guests realized what was happening and started to whisper, my parents hurried over to Mia to calm her down, but Mia was unstoppable. Looking around the hall, she said to Alex, "This place is so tacky. Our wedding was much grander, wasn't it? This is what you get from a wedding of the poor." Alex, now white-faced, was trying to say something to Mia. He must have been trying to stop her, but it was clear to anyone watching that Mia held the power in their relationship. At that very moment, as Mia wandered aimlessly around the venue, asking in a daze, "Where should we sit?" divine punishment came crashing down on her. "The absolute worst of the worst. That would be you, wouldn't it?" A guest of Noah's stood up and spoke to Mia, his voice calm, yet resonating. "Huh?" Mia said, turning toward the voice. Her eyes widened. The middle-aged man who had stood up bowed his head in apology to the onlookers. "The overdressed woman, that's one of my employees. I'm terribly sorry she's ruined your ceremony." "Eh?" Noah, sitting next to me, voiced his surprise. All I knew about this man was that he was a fishing buddy of Noah's. Despite their age difference, I had heard they had a great time talking about fishing. It seemed that Noah had no idea this man was a CEO, let alone the CEO of the company where Mia worked. Even when I asked him what was going on, all Noah could do was shake his head in confusion. Mia, for her part, stood speechless, with her mouth agape at the CEO's revelation. There was no doubt she was now in a tight spot. The CEO then dealt Mia the final blow. "By the way, who was the man you brought along today? The one you claimed to be your husband the other day? Who's this? Or do you have multiple husbands?" At the CEO's shocking declaration, Mia began to panic. Alex, always the helpless one, grabbed Mia by the wrist and ushered her out. "I'm terribly sorry for the trouble. I'm at fault for not supervising my wife properly. This reception was prepared with so much effort by the bride's sisters. We'll leave now. Please, enjoy the rest of the event." In the center of the venue, Alex made Mia bow her head in apology, then led her out of the venue. The atmosphere in the wedding reception cooled instantly, and that's when Mason took the mic. I was worried about how he would handle the situation, but Mason really was a pro. He warmed the frozen atmosphere by talking about Noah's great personality, and shared some funny stories about the relationship advice Noah often sought from him. The tension in the venue dissolved, and the rest of the ceremony was able to proceed as planned. After the reception, during the farewell, Mason deeply apologized to us again. But it wasn't Mason who was at fault, it was Mia. In fact, the only reason we were able to continue with the reception as planned was thanks to Mason. When I expressed our gratitude, Mason smiled and said, "It was a good ceremony," before heading home. After such a tumultuous wedding, it seemed my brother and his wife were heading for even more turbulent times. It came to light that Mia had been involved with several men. On the day of the wedding, Mia, who had been preparing herself in a huff after my call, made a huge fuss and demanded that Alex, who had been spending time with the kids, drive her to the venue. Alex had apparently made it clear to Mia that they would not be attending our ceremony, but Mia was always distracted, fiddling with her phone. He had told her several times, but it seemed she had let it go in one ear and out the other. Alex opposed Mia's actions time and time again, telling her she couldn't do this. But when Mia kicked up a fuss and insisted on going by taxi, he reluctantly tagged along. Perhaps Alex felt responsible to contain Mia when she went on a rampage at the venue. He later apologized for not being able to stop her and paid the full cost of the ceremony. When Alex received Mason's revelation about witnessing Mia's infidelity, he left the venue with Mia. He entrusted the child to a friend and confronted Mia. To his surprise, Mia admitted to having relationships with multiple men, something she had been doing since before their marriage. She confessed to choosing Alex, the highest earner and most submissive among her partners, to be her husband. The identity of the baby's father was unknown, but of course she kept this from Alex. This meant Alex could have been raising a child that was not his own. Shocked, Alex conducted a DNA test with the child, which confirmed they were not related. Despite his agony, he decided he wanted custody after the divorce. Mia treated the child with indifference, and Alex felt he couldn't entrust the child to her. Mia probably never wanted the child in the first place. She easily gave up custody to Alex, but they had a lot of disputes over alimony in the divorce proceedings. In the end, it seemed that Alex received a large sum of alimony from Mia, but seeing him say, "There's no point in having money," with a sad smile was heartbreaking. Some years have passed since that ordeal. Noah and I had a baby. When we brought the baby home, Alex's child was excited, exclaiming, "How cute!" I had been worried about Alex, who had seemed dispirited after the divorce and his return home. But he seemed lively now. Seeing Alex holding my baby and saying with a laugh, "I remember this. Babies are so soft." Noah and I shared a smile. Despite our wedding almost being ruined by Mia and Alex's life being trampled on, we're living happily now. Alex told us, "No matter what happens, if you have the desire to protect your child, you can overcome anything. Now that you're parents, you both have to try even harder." His words resonated deeply with us.
I'm Sally, and my husband Tommy and I used to work at the same place. Tommy, who is 2 years older than me, was my senior at work. We became close when we ended up on the same project team a few years later and started dating soon after. 2 years into our relationship, we got married. After our daughter was born, I decided to quit my job. I loved my work, but my mother-in-law told Tommy that it was strange for a daughter-in-law to be working. So Tommy asked me to focus on household chores instead. From then on, I became a stay-at-home mom. We had our occasional fights, but overall we lived a peaceful and happy life. Then, one day, when our daughter was in elementary school, Tommy came home from work in the middle of the day. This was unusual, so I asked him what happened. It happened so suddenly that I asked him what was going on, and he answered, "Not only was the job hard, but I was also being harassed by my boss, which caused me to become depressed. I consulted with a doctor at the hospital. I quit my job because someone told me I should quit." When I pressed for details, he explained, "My job was tough, and I was also facing harassment from my boss. I've been diagnosed with depression. The doctor advised me to quit, so I did." He also told me I don't want you to have any more contact with anyone at the company. I felt so bad for not realizing that Tommy was so traumatized. It was really heartbreaking that Tommy was in so much pain and he couldn't notice. I felt terrible for not noticing how much he was struggling. I thought it would be best for Tommy to take some time off to recover. Our income took a hit, but I believed we could manage with some budgeting and my savings from before we got married. Above all else, I thought it was important that Tommy recover mentally and be able to return to society. However, 6 months passed, and Tommy's condition didn't improve. We started using my savings to cover his medical expenses. I decided to take up a part-time job to help out. I thought that once Tommy returned to work, I could save my part-time earnings. Our daughter was now old enough to help with chores, which was a big relief. I did my best to take care of housework and work to the best of my ability so as to not burden Tommy. But Tommy's depression didn't get better. Of course, I knew it wouldn't heal that quickly. He would go to the clinic during the day and come back in the evening, only to laze around in the house. He seemed fine when talking and eating, so it was hard to tell if he was improving. I suggested trying a different clinic, but he said he was fine with the current one. "Just stay as you are," was all he said. I once saw Tommy watching TV and laughing, so I asked, "Maybe it's time to start looking for a job?" His face turned stern. "Just thinking about it makes me feel sick and nauseous," he replied. I didn't want to force him into work, especially since he's sick. But the financial strain was getting to me, and I started getting annoyed at Tommy's little comments. Even when I rushed home from my part-time job to make dinner, Tommy would sprawl on the sofa and say, "Is dinner ready yet? I'm starving." I couldn't help but wonder why I had to rush home from work to cook for Tommy, who had been home all day. After meals, Tommy wouldn't even take his dishes to the sink. Clothes were strewn around the living room, and the dishes from the lunch I prepared were still on the table. I was torn between being understanding because Tommy was sick and wanting him to at least do these small things. Then, another problem arose. I came home from work to find my mother-in-law in the house. "What are you so surprised about? Can't I visit my own son?" she said. I quickly replied, "That's not what I meant." She continued, "Why didn't you tell me Tommy is depressed? I had no idea." Honestly, what should I say? I had doubts. I wondered, shouldn't Tommy be the one to tell her? As I sighed, she glared at me. "You're taking good care of my son, right? If you had been supportive, this wouldn't have happened. Do you understand?" She's been like this since we got married, blaming me for everything. If anything happened, it was all my fault. I was subjected to old-fashioned harassment many times. I used to visit the in-laws often, but her constant harassment made me distance myself. Tommy didn't care and let her harass me. But he also didn't mind when I wanted to distance myself from her. Her attitude of indifference worked to my advantage. And even when I told her that I wanted to leave my mother-in-law, she didn't seem to care, saying, "Well, it's fine." I was able to open it. For a while, life was peaceful. But now that Tommy is home during weekdays, mother-in-law has been coming over daily. Even though my mother-in-law comes over, she doesn't lift a finger to help. She and Tommy eat the lunch I've prepared, leave their dishes, and just lounge around, making the house even messier. Cleaning has become a real chore. Since my father-in-law passed away, it's just mother-in-law in the in-laws' house. At first I thought she might be lonely, so I put up with it. But she eats dinner at our place almost every day. criticizes my cooking, and even blames me for Tommy's depression before leaving. She never contributes to groceries or brings any food. Our income is already tight, and now we have to cover her meals too. It's a tough situation. Stressed out, I decided to talk to my sister-in-law, Lucy, who lives near the in-laws' house. Lucy is the only reasonable one among them and has always stood up for me when mother-in-law was giving me a hard time. She's smart and articulate, so she can easily counter any of mother-in-law's excuses. Mother-in-law doesn't seem to like Lucy much. I told Lucy about the daily visits from mother-in-law, and the next day she came over after work and scolded mother-in-law for lazing around. Mother-in-law was shocked by Lucy's unexpected arrival and was at a loss for words. Then, the next day after work, she came to my house with me and scolded mother-in-law for being lazy at home. Mother-in-law was surprised by the sudden appearance of Lucy, who didn't know she was here and was quite anxious. I made various excuses, but as usual, she was yelled at, and my mother-in-law's face turned red and couldn't say anything. Lucy warned her, "Next time you come, Sally will let me know, okay?" After that, mother-in-law never visited again. One problem solved, at least. Meanwhile, Tommy was indifferent and unhelpful. Even after mother-in-law stopped coming, he became increasingly lazy. With my dwindling savings and income, it was hard to cover living expenses and rent for 3 people. I was really struggling. I don't want to force Tommy to work, understanding his illness, but something had to change. I have to somehow get Tommy to work. I suggested changing his psychiatrist, but he wasn't interested. "Anywhere I'll go, it'll be the same," he said. I prepared some candidate hospitals and gave them a pamphlet, but they said, "You can stay with your current hospital." I offered to go with him, but he still wasn't interested. I started to doubt if Tommy really wanted to get better. My doubts turned into mistrust. First, I called a mental health clinic where Tommy said he was getting treatment. I wanted to know about Tommy's current situation. I found out he had only visited once a year ago and never returned. The next day, I followed him and discovered he was buying lottery tickets instead of going to the clinic. I checked his wallet that night and found a bank statement showing transfers from mother-in-law. It turns out that Tommy's lottery ticket money is given to him by mother-in-law. My mistrust in Tommy grew. I contacted a former colleague to find out why Tommy had quit his job. I had to do it secretly because Tommy had told me not to contact them. What the colleague told me was completely different from Tommy's story. It all started with a big mistake Tommy made at work, which he tried to cover up. However, when Tommy's boss found out, Tommy got scolded and lost his temper. He ended up arguing with his boss and stormed out, resignation letter in hand. Days later, Tommy kept calling the company claiming, "This is workplace harassment. You've damaged my mental health. Pay me compensation." The company was quite bothered by this. Of course, the company rejected all of Tommy's demands. Even then, Tommy persisted. When the company's legal advisor reached out to him, Tommy said, "The company made me sick. I'll get a medical certificate," and hung up. After that, he suddenly stopped contacting them. I had a hunch about what happened. Most likely, Tommy went to a psychiatrist after saying he'd get a medical certificate, but couldn't get diagnosed with depression, so he couldn't get the certificate. That's probably why he stopped contacting the company. Eventually, he got tired of working. He took advantage of my kindness, lied about going to the hospital, and lived a lazy life. I was beyond angry. I was disgusted. I didn't want to be with Tommy anymore. I planned to get divorce papers the next day after work. But then, I got a call from Lucy. Turns out, Lucy's husband got transferred and they were moving to another state. I've been really grateful to Lucy, so I decided to postpone the divorce until things settled down. 2 months later, Lucy moved. I quietly told her I was considering divorce, and she said, "I'm sorry about my foolish brother and mother. Our family ties may end, but let's remain friends." Around the time Lucy's move was complete, Tommy said, "Mom's coming to live with us next month." I asked, "What do you mean, coming to visit?" Tommy said, "No, she's moving in. She'll live with us." Apparently, with Lucy moving, his mom felt lonely. Their old house was getting run down, so she wanted to live with us, and Tommy agreed. Both Tommy and his mom were so selfish, but I just said, "Oh, okay." Inside, I'd reached my limit. I was already planning to divorce him, so I decided to act quickly. Just divorcing him wouldn't be enough, considering what he had done. The next day, while Tommy was at his usual lottery ticket spot, I called the movers. I signed a contract on the spot and smoothly prepared to leave in secret. I quickly found a new apartment. "If Mom's coming, we need to tidy up," I said as I hurriedly packed and sent my belongings to my new home. The situation with my mother-in-law moving in was so unexpected that it actually worked in my favor. Nobody suspected what I was planning. 2 days before mother-in-law was supposed to arrive, while Tommy was at the lottery ticket stand, I left the divorce papers at home and left with our daughter. Around the time Tommy would be back, he called me in a panic. When I answered, he blurted out, "What's going on? Why did you leave so suddenly?" I replied, "Didn't you see the divorce papers? That's what's going on." Tommy said, "Why all of a sudden?" Keeping my cool, I said, "Did you really think I didn't know? I know everything." Tommy sounded puzzled. "What?" So I continued, "I know why you quit your job. You weren't harassed. You're the one at fault. You've been going to the lottery stand every day instead of a psychiatrist. You didn't get diagnosed with depression, did you? I also know mother-in-law has been sending you money for lottery tickets." You could hear the panic in Tommy's voice. I told him, "You've been deceiving me, and you want me to live with a mother-in-law who's been making my life miserable? You're insane. I don't want to be with a man like you anymore, so we're getting a divorce." Tommy kept refusing. "No, please reconsider." When I said, "If you don't agree, I'll hire a lawyer and demand compensation in divorce court," he quickly agreed. Tommy had no job and no income. He probably realized he'd be in a tight spot if I demanded compensation. Later, I went back to get the divorce papers and submitted them before Tommy could change his mind. Mother-in-law hadn't moved in yet, so I was able to divorce without seeing her. After that, I got a lot of calls from mother-in-law, but when I texted Tommy, "I'll consult a lawyer," the call stopped. As for Tommy, he and mother-in-law ended up living in an apartment together. They couldn't pay the rent and had to sell the house. Mother-in-law had sold her own house, so they had nowhere to go. They ended up in a cramped old apartment. Tommy, who hadn't worked for over a year and spent all his time on lottery tickets, had no income. Mother-in-law had squandered most of her late husband's inheritance on Tommy's lottery habit, so they were forced to live on her meager pension. As for me, I started a new life with my daughter in a rented apartment. I considered moving back to my parents' house, but that would mean my daughter would have to change schools, so we moved within the same school district. At first, I was uneasy about running into Tommy or mother-in-law, but they moved away quickly, so life became worry-free. Our living expenses dropped, and I was earning more at my part-time job. I could even buy things my daughter wanted. Even at my part-time job, my hard work was appreciated and my salary was better. So I can buy things that my daughter wants. Money isn't everything, but I feel more relaxed now. My daughter and I are living a very happy life. We've been invited to visit Lucy and her husband at their new location, so we're planning a trip.
Hospitalization? You're planning to use that as an excuse to slack off on housework even more? Slack off? I didn't mean to. If you keep shirking your chores, divorce is next. Unfazed, my husband casually spoke these words, not worrying about my upcoming hospital stay. Apparently, he thinks he can intimidate me with the threat of divorce. He believes that if he dangles the possibility of a split, I'll become obedient. What an insult. Just because I'm a housewife doesn't mean I'll let myself be pushed around. I'm definitely going to divorce him. Definitely escape from this hell. I'm Sandy Davis, 28 years old. A year ago, I married Kenny, a colleague from work. We were in different departments, but often interacted, and his advances led to a relationship. After dating smoothly, we finally tied the knot. With our marriage, I resigned from the company and became a full-time housewife. That's because Kenny had said this to me before we got married. Hey Sandy, after we get married, could you become a full-time housewife? Huh? But I don't really hate my current job. My mom was always a stay-at-home mom, and I think it's best for women to protect the home. Thanks to her, my dad could focus on work without stress. Is that so? Are you sure? I mean, I'm not particularly skilled at housework or anything. That's okay. All I want is for you to handle the house without overworking yourself. I'll earn our living out there. Okay, I understand. If you say so, Kenny, I'll try being a housewife. So I quit my job and started a new life as a housewife. Managing unfamiliar chores was challenging, but it was my life with Kenny, whom I loved so much. Plus, I lost my parents a few years ago, and my only family now is my husband. I was determined to cherish this life. However, happiness doesn't last forever. One day, 6 months after our marriage, my husband came home from work in an unusually bad mood. Even when tired, he would usually greet me with "I'm home," but not today. He let out a big sigh and plopped down on the sofa. I cautiously approached him. Kenny, welcome home. You seem tired. Are you okay? Dinner's ready. Would you like to eat? Or maybe you want to take a shower first? Hey, Kenny. Can't you see I'm thinking? Stop bothering me. With wide eyes and a glare in my direction, my husband lashed out. I had never seen him this angry before, and I involuntarily flinched. I'm sorry. Despite my immediate apology, he clicked his tongue loudly enough for me to hear it. In an obnoxious tone, he began to take out his bad mood on me. Must be nice just lazing around the house all day. Wait, Kenny, what are you saying all of a sudden? You're supposedly a housewife, but really you're just lounging around while I'm at work. You're really the worst. Hold on. I'm always doing chores around the house. Shut up. You're nothing but a leech. Yet you have the nerve to talk back to me? He suddenly grabbed a handful of my hair and yanked it upwards. I felt an unspeakable fear at his actions. I quickly raised my voice, "Stop it!" But my plea didn't reach him. For the following hour, I was subjected to a barrage of verbal abuse, called an inept wife and a freeloader. I'm reducing our monthly expenses, you know. As he declared, his treatment of me worsened day by day. Initially, he only reduced our spending money by $100, but now I'm only getting half of what we used to. Our relationship wasn't one between husband and wife anymore. It was more like master and servant. This was only a year into our marriage. You might think it's only been a year, but for me, it was a year of hell. From the day Kenny lost his senses, time seemed to crawl at a painfully slow pace. Every night, I was reprimanded and blamed for every little thing. Even so, the reason I stayed with Kenny as a couple was because I couldn't bring myself to truly dislike him. I kept hoping he would someday return to his old self. One day, something happened. I was cleaning around the house when my cell phone rang. Checking the screen, I saw a name that I hadn't seen in a while. Laurie, A former coworker's. Excited by the unexpected call, I immediately pressed the answer button. Hello, Lori. Long time no see.
Sandy, it's been a while. Hey, can you chat right now?
Of course.
I'm sorry for being so blunt, but Sandy, are you fighting with your husband?
Arguing? Why do you ask?
I heard through the grapevine. Recently, Kenny has been talking bad about you at work.
What's this about? According to Lori, my husband looks as if he is very dominant at home lately. She can't do anything without me. She's so helpless when it comes to housework. She would be divorced if she wasn't with me. Apparently, he had been bad-mouthing me to our former colleagues and junior staff in his department. Because I used to work at the same company, everyone in his workplace knows me. My former coworkers, familiar with me, seem to have subtly defended me, but it seems that even this did not sit well with Kenny, and he was giving the cold shoulder to the juniors and colleagues who defended me. Because of this, the trust he had built up was crumbling, and the atmosphere in his department was supposedly quite bad. Upon hearing this, Laurie felt concerned and decided to reach out to me. I was at a loss for words after hearing this series of events. Not only did I feel guilty, but I also felt extremely embarrassed that my husband was causing trouble for his coworkers. I'm sorry, Laurie. It seems like Kenny has been causing trouble.
It's okay. I'm in a different department, but you need to do something about this sooner. Kenny will be isolated at work.
I know, but he won't even listen to me at home.
I see. But it would be better to discuss this before things get out of hand. For your sake, and for Kenny's too.
Yeah, you're right. Thanks, Laurie. I'll try to talk to him tonight.
Give it a try, and if anything comes up, I'm always here to listen.
After saying thank you and hanging up the phone, I got back to cleaning. I made up my mind to have a serious talk with Kenny once he got home, and so I waited for his return. Several hours later, my husband came home from work as always. He headed straight for the fridge and grabbed a beer. In the past few months, he hadn't even been saying, "I'm home," nor discussing the events of his day. After finishing his meal, he usually starts lecturing me, so before he could take a sip of beer, I brought up the conversation. Hey, Kenny, have things been going well at work recently? Huh? What's with the sudden question? I'm not so incompetent that you need to worry about me. It's not about work, actually. I heard something today. They said you've been talking behind my back at work? Talking behind your back? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb! I rebuked my husband, who tried to play it off. I confronted him, making it clear to my surprised husband. Hey, what do you want to accomplish? Not just at home, but even at work. You've been bad-mouthing me. What's so fun about creating a negative atmosphere in your department? Huh? What are you saying? Do you realize everyone is having a hard time because of you, Kenny? Why can't you see that? If you want to talk bad about me in front of me, then do as you please, but don't cause trouble for your colleagues too. Right after I said that, a sharp sound echoed in the room. I felt a dull pain on my left cheek, slowly spreading. A few seconds later, I realized my husband had slapped me. Why would you do that? Why? It's because you keep back-talking. Back-talking? I was just worried about you, Kenny. Shut up! There's no reason for you to be ordering me around. Get it? You can live because of me. If you understand that, just keep quiet and take care of the house. He spat out the harsh words with a strong tone. I was unable to articulate a response. I had plenty to say, but my body wouldn't cooperate due to the fear. Afterwards, my husband started drinking his beer as if nothing had happened. He started laughing while watching TV and ordered me to bring him snacks. In the end, no matter how much I worried about him, no matter what I say to him, it's all pointless. No matter what, I can't seem to get my husband to understand. Since then, the way he treated me worsened day by day. Not only my heart, but also my body was in shreds. Then one day, on my way to the grocery store, I was suddenly overcome with extreme nausea. My vision warped and I was assaulted by such severe dizziness that I couldn't even stand. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a hospital bed. The doctor, upon seeing me awake, kindly explained everything to me. I had collapsed on the street. I was suffering from malnutrition and the stress had caused me to develop a stomach ulcer. Miss Davis, right now, both your mind and body are completely exhausted. You're in a severe state of overwork. For now, you should be admitted to the hospital for about a week. Hospitalization? But I'm a stay-at-home wife. And the household chores. What are you saying? If you continue like this, you'll wear yourself out. I understand. But then it was already past 7 p.m. I decided to contact my husband to bring me some change of clothes, so I took out my phone. To my surprise, there were tons of messages that had arrived within the last hour.
Where are you now? Get back home. Now. You're such a money sucker, and now you're slacking off from your chores?
He must have returned from work to find me gone and gotten furious that cleaning and laundry weren't done. Gathering my courage, I called him. After a few rings, he picked up.
Where the hell have you been? And what have you been doing?
He shouted as soon as he picked up the phone. I took a deep breath and slowly explained the situation to him. That's why the doctor told me that I need to be hospitalized for about a week, so...
Hospitalized? So you're planning to use that as an excuse to slack off even more?
I'm not slacking off,
You've already slacked off on your chores, so the next thing will be divorce.
What?
You'd be in trouble if we got divorced, right? You don't have any relatives, do you? If I leave you, you'll be all alone for sure, won't you?
Even though his wife had been hospitalized, instead of showing me concern, he used the threat of divorce to order me to come home. At that moment, a fury I had never felt before reached its peak. Enough. I've had enough. I will never be happy if I continue to live with this man. Then it's better to. As I gathered my thoughts, my husband caught up in his own power trip, starting to provoke me over the phone.
Hey, are you listening? You'd be in trouble if we divorced, wouldn't you?
Fine.
What? What did you say?
I said fine. Let's get a divorce.
No. What are you talking about? Do you even understand what divorce means?
Of course I do. But in return, you prepared the divorce papers.
As if you have the guts to divorce me. Just remember this.
In his annoyance, my husband hung up without waiting for a reply. The next phone call came later. The caller was my old boss from the job I used to have. Actually, even after I became a housewife, my old boss had been contacting me on several occasions. You see, I used to enjoy getting certifications, and I had several before I got married. I got some during my student days and some after I started working, and they were all beneficial for my job. Thanks to them, I had a wide range of work responsibilities, and I was trusted by the higher-ups. When I decided to quit my job after getting married, they tried to keep me on many times. This time, having decided to divorce while in hospital, I was also considering returning to work. When I mentioned this to my boss, he immediately agreed to take me back. He even took care of the arrangements for company housing, so it was decided that I would return to work and move into the dormitory next month. I'm ready now. I can get away from my husband at any time. Later, when I returned home from the hospital, I found the completed divorce papers on the desk. I signed them and immediately submitted them to the courthouse. I hurried back home and packed up my essentials. Then I left the house before my ex-husband returned. A few hours later, while I was taking a breather in a budget hotel, my phone vibrated with a call from Kenny. Reluctantly answering the persistent phone calls, he yelled at me.
Hey, did you get discharged from the hospital today?
Yes, so what? I responded.
What do you mean, so what? You didn't leave the divorce papers, so you went home, did you? Why didn't you wait for me to come back?
You already know the answer. There's no reason to live together in the same house when we're strangers now, is there?
Huh? Strangers? What are you talking about? You threw away the divorce papers, didn't you?
Threw them away?
You got scared when you realized I was serious about the divorce papers and threw them away, right?
It seems like Kenny is convinced that there's no way I could go through with the divorce. As proof, he is convinced that I threw away the divorce papers and speaks as if I have no intention of divorcing at all. Responding to him, who didn't seem to understand the situation, I replied sarcastically, "Listen, you seem to be misunderstanding something, but I never threw away the divorce papers."
Huh? Then where are they?
I've submitted them. To the city hall.
What kind of joke is...
It's not a joke. It's already been accepted, and you and I are now strangers. We'll never have to deal with each other again. At that explanation, he raised his voice.
Don't mess with me.
Whether he couldn't believe what I said or not, he started blaming me again.
You. There's no way you can divorce. You who have no family? No job?
I certainly have no family, but I do have a job now.
Huh? You're a housewife.
That was true until now. I contacted my boss while in the hospital, and they agreed to hire me back.
That's not something you can do so easily.
It's possible. They even told me they want me back.
There's no way.
You probably don't know, but I'm going to resume work and live in the company's dormitory from next month. Then over the phone, Kenny let out a painful voice.
Wait a minute. This must be a joke, right? I wasn't serious about the divorce.
I don't care. I accepted the divorce because it was what you wanted. There's no problem with that, right?
But that's a problem. How am I supposed to live without you?
As soon as he understood it was a divorce, my ex-husband began to cling without learning his lesson. Disgusted by his attitude, I couldn't help but raise my voice. Huh? I don't care about your life. You're an adult. Figure it out on your own. I was your failed wife, right? So you shouldn't have any problems without me.
That's not true. Wait, I apologize. Please forgive me.
Shut up. I don't love you one bit anymore. I will never forget how you treated me like a slave. Don't ever appear in front of me again. Reflect on your actions and live alone for the rest of your life. After hanging up the phone unilaterally, I blocked his number. I made sure we would never have to interact again. That being said, my new job is at his workplace. The news of our divorce spread through the office. Because he badmouthed me at work, he seems to be looked at as getting what he deserves. He started to feel out of place at work and began taking unauthorized absences. As a result, Kenny was fired for misconduct. Thanks to this, all connections with him were completely cut off. He ended up in debt due to the alimony I demanded after the divorce. Losing his job and even incurring debt, I don't know what he's doing or where. The one thing I'm sure of is that he isn't living a wealthy life. His unhappiness is my only consolation after the torment I have suffered. From now on, I will work for myself and live for myself. I will regain the freedom that I lost during our marriage.
It's been a decade since we tied the knot. Every year, we've made a point of visiting my in-laws' place during the Christmas holidays. As it does every year, that time is fast approaching again. The truth is, every year's Christmas is a severe strain for me. Yes, that's right. I've been having major issues with my mother-in-law, and just the thought of it weighs me down. As December draws near, I feel my spirits sink lower and lower. Every year, I rack my brains, wondering if there isn't some way out of this. My name is Lisa. I fell in love with my husband at work, and we've been married for 10 years now. I knew my mother-in-law was a bit of a busybody when we went to announce our engagement, but I never thought things would come to this. I suppose I should have been more level-headed, but at the time, I was so smitten with Paul that I didn't see the signs. I remember it as if it were yesterday. I splurged on famous chocolate as a gift, but my mother-in-law's first words were, "You shouldn't have bothered. I hate chocolate. You were so rude to give me what I don't like." Caught off guard by her words, all I could say was, "I'm sorry." One can tell a lot about you from a simple gift. I wonder if you can get along well with Paul, she said. After 3 years of marriage, I finally got pregnant and I gave birth. My mother-in-law was making a fuss about how useless I was as a wife for giving birth to a girl. Her words hit me hard as I was dealing with my first childbirth. And since then, problems with my mother-in-law only got worse. "Lisa, why didn't you give birth to a boy who will be the heir? We don't need a girl. Please give birth to a boy. If you can't do that, you're disqualified as a wife." Paul should have married a younger wife. A wife older than her husband is the worst. My mother-in-law would say things like that without considering my feelings. Of course, I talked to Paul about it, but he had no intention of defending me. "Don't take everything she says so seriously," he would say, which was just horrible. Each time, I would confide in Sarah, my sister-in-law. I've been getting along well with her since the first time I was dating Paul. And since I'm an only child, I saw her like a real sister. But my mother-in-law would call me every day asking if I had a child yet. I couldn't stand being treated as if my daughter was unwanted. And then my mother-in-law started asking me to send her money behind Paul's back because she was having a hard time. I couldn't ignore the fact that my mother-in-law was in trouble. And then, 2 years after the birth of my daughter, I was blessed with a second child. I thought that if it was a boy this time, I wouldn't be criticized, and I was on tender hooks until I found out the sex of the baby. But when I went for a checkup, the doctor told me it was a girl, and I was at a loss for words. And so began the phone onslaught from my mother-in-law again. "Lisa, don't you know the sex of the baby yet?" "I'm sorry, I don't know yet." "Modern hospitals should be able to tell. There's no way they can't." "I'll let you know as soon as I find out." "I don't want another girl. Sorry." I was so upset and complained to my sister-in-law. And so I gave birth without revealing the sex of the baby. When they told me, "Congratulations, it's a girl," I could only imagine my mother-in-law's demonic face, and all I could do was laugh. And my mother-in-law never once showed up at the hospital. But it was all the better for me. My mother lives 20 minutes away by car, and I had left my older child with her for the birth. My mother brought my daughter to the hospital, and we were happy to have a new family member without anyone complaining. I went back to my parents' house with my mother and my older child for a month. The month I spent relaxing with my mother at home was a time of nostalgia and relief. And when my younger child's 1-month checkup was over, I returned home, but I hadn't heard a thing from my mother-in-law. And then several months passed, and the usual Christmas holidays were upon us. I was spending every day with a heavy heart, but I couldn't avoid it, and I thought she might be in a better mood once she saw her grandchildren. So I decided to bring a famous cake this time. And on the day, Paul drove us to our usual steak restaurant. As I wondered what would be said, my heart was pounding. When we entered the reserved private room, my in-laws were already there. Despite her grumpy demeanor, the arrival of my brother-in-law and his wife soon had the meal off to a lively start. Of course, the conversation turned to my younger child, and everyone was excited, but I noticed that my mother-in-law's face was tense. I sensed something was wrong and tried to change the subject when, "You can't even give birth to a boy? You're a useless wife! You're not part of this family!" My mother-in-law suddenly started saying terrible things. And then she deliberately knocked over the tea that was in front of her. "Oh, I'm sorry. If your daughter gets a burn on her face, no one will know she's a girl." Suddenly, I was overcome with rage. My mother-in-law despised me for not giving birth to a boy. During a meal with my in-laws, the moment my mother-in-law said, "What a complete letdown of a woman!" a plate suddenly flew from where my father-in-law was sitting. What are you doing?" I was just shocked. I couldn't believe the usually mild-mannered father-in-law would throw a plate. This time, it seemed like my father-in-law turned the table on mother-in-law, which I must admit felt good. Next, my father-in-law yelled, "Enough! What right do you have to say such things? The child born has no sin. The real letdown of a woman is you." "What are you talking about? Don't joke around. A wife who can't give birth to a boy is like garbage. Such an insolent woman." "What are you, who only gave birth to boys? I wanted a girl, but you know, the child that was born has no sin. It doesn't matter if it's a girl or a boy." "There's no way it doesn't matter. Boy! Boy, boy, boy! Only boys have value. Worthless wife, worthless granddaughter, hopeless. See, you admit it, so you have nothing to say." I was holding back my tears, but at the moment when I was about to break down with a sound, "You! Enough already! Lisa has given birth to 2 children. What more do you want? They're not your children. You don't help raise them, you just demand a boy out of your own selfishness. If you want a boy that much, why don't you give birth yourself? Of course, that's impossible for an old woman like you." "Hey, stop it now. What you've been doing isn't just bullying. Even when you got an expensive chocolate, you said, 'I hate chocolate,' even though you can't afford to buy such a chocolate. When will you have a child? I don't need a girl. You're useless as a wife. Serve me. Send me money. Get a job and make money. You're getting carried away, you stupid-looking old woman." Then my brother-in-law clapped his hands, and after him, Paul also started clapping. Huh? What's going on? I didn't understand anything. "I'm a man, so I didn't get involved, but I'm surprised. My real mother is a professional daughter-in-law bully." "Huh? What are you talking about? I don't understand. Who's bullying daughter-in-law?" "You. There's no one else who would do that. I was almost abandoned by my beloved wife." "Huh? Men are insensitive and useless, brother. Absolutely. In comparison, women's intuition is terrifyingly accurate. You can't cheat." "Hey, what are you saying?" "It's obviously a joke, Sarah. Take over." "Roger? What? Are you guys some kind of fraudulent group? What do you think of your real mother?" "What do you mean, fraudulent group? You're talking about yourself." "What? Why me? You know a man named Mr. Brown, right?" "Huh? I don't know such a person. What are you talking about?" My mother-in-law was clearly flustered. She was trying hard to change the subject with an innocent look. Then my sister-in-law continued the conversation. "What's this daughter-in-law bullying circle?" Huh? I don't know. I don't know such a thing. Catch old mother-in-laws and invite them to the circle. Teach the members your invited techniques, traps, and ways to bully their daughter-in-laws. Every week you hold seminars and have a good time with the outrageous old ladies. You've been practicing the daughter-in-law bullying. You're a shitty mother-in-law. Invited by Mr. Brown, you were helping and aiding. Mr. Brown's aim was to earn money by holding seminars, but Mr. Brown was short of funds and was extorting you. You were extorting Lisa for money every month. When the money didn't come in as you expected, you vented your frustration on Mr. Brown and practiced daughter-in-law bullying. Do you think such a rotten, shitty mother-in-law will be forgiven? Mother-in-law? What does this mean? That's not true! Everything Sarah is saying is a lie. I want you to stop! Then what's this? My sister-in-law pulled out an envelope from her bag and showed the photo, and my mother-in-law's eyes were wide with surprise. This is a photo from your seminar, right? You're looking pretty friendly with Mr. Brown. And what's this? Walking arm in arm is strange, isn't it? This is unacceptable. I was confused by this unexpected event, but now I understand why you've been bullying Lisa. My wife is too strong-willed. You can't win against her. Stop joking around. I didn't know anything and let it slide, but it won't go unpunished. Misunderstanding! Enough. Let's stop. I haven't done anything. After all, you're just misunderstanding and overreacting. It's natural to have a few close friends. Then it happened. From the next private room, the voices of a few women laughing and talking could be heard. Hey, do you remember? Patricia from the 3rd district who was in the same class at elementary school? Ah, you mean that mean devil Patricia. I heard she got caught by a man and is giving him all her money. And apparently that man has started a mother-in-law harassment circle, where he invites mothers-in-law who want to harass their daughters-in-law and hold seminars or something. Oh, I know! Harassing her daughter-in-law? That's just the kind of thing that devil Patricia would do. And she's apparently investing money every month because the guy is short of money. She seems to be told that he'll return the money tenfold, but that's definitely impossible. That man has a family, and his daughter is disabled and living in a wheelchair. So she's being fooled by such a man and might destroy her own family? It's a wonder that her family hasn't collapsed so far. The face of the mother-in-law rapidly turned pale and stiffened. And then the father-in-law opened his mouth. Your life is over. What are you talking about? I've come this far without knowing what kind of woman you are. All the terrible things you've done to Lisa were simply because you are foolish as a person. Lisa, I am truly sorry. I apologize. It's not your fault. Please don't apologize. What? It sounds like I'm the one who's wrong. Just stop it! I haven't said anything wrong, and I've been complaining because my daughter-in-law isn't good enough. Don't blame me. She's such a terrible daughter-in-law after all. The terrible daughter-in-law is you. You got married, hiding everything from me, then demanded money from the kids when they became independent and give it to other men. You are a scammer, aren't you? A scammer? The fact that I have been serving you until now is true. It's a joke to be called a scammer for that. You've been serving me? What on earth have you done for me? I've been taking my shirts and suits to the dry cleaners myself and mostly have dinner outside, only returning home to sleep. That's right, when we were little, Mom wasn't at home, and dinner was like snacks or sweet buns. We always wondered where she was going. What are you talking about? Exactly. We were told not to tell Dad anything. We thought it was strange from that time. She didn't even come to school for portfolio days or interviews. When I was taking high school entrance exams, the only person who helped me was my teacher. I was in trouble because I didn't know which school to go to. I was moved when I ate good, homemade food for the first time after getting married. Supermarket side dishes were a luxury. How could a mother like that blame Lisa? Lisa is a hardworking mother and a good wife. Don't keep quiet. Say something. You can't say anything. You thought what you've been doing wasn't found out, so you got carried away. You had no idea that the conversation would turn into this today. I wouldn't keep quiet about this. I've been talking to my father-in-law for a long time. What did you say? You have to leave this house today. We're getting divorced. Divorce? Why is this happening? It can't be helped because Lisa is my child, right? They're so close, they fight. Don't mess with me. Are you going to play me more? I also knew that you had been cheating on me since your 20s, but I kept quiet because of the children. That's why you can't get rid of the habit of cheating. You're walking arm in arm with a friend? I've never seen such a friend. It's over. Your life ends here. You can do whatever you want from now on. Wow, I didn't expect that. So that's why she wasn't at home. It's impossible not to have time to make dinner for your children. It's funny that such a person was pretending to be a good mother-in-law and complaining. It's not a joke. I've sold our house and all that's left is to submit the divorce papers. I've been fooled for a long time. Now I can live my own life, properly. You sold the house? What are you doing without my permission? I won't get divorced. No matter what you say, it's too late. I don't think I'll ever see you again. If you have any complaints, please contact my lawyer. Huh? What will happen to me from now on? I don't have a house. I don't have any money. How am I supposed to live? Why are you taking away my happiness at this age? You're the one who kept taking away Lisa's happiness. Before, you took it from me too. It's just that it's come back to you. Please rethink. I admit I was wrong, but please don't divorce me. Don't make me laugh at this point. It's decided. You have to leave the house tomorrow. I've warned you. The divorce is decided, so I'll go home now. Me too. My father-in-law had been pretending not to know about my mother-in-law's cheating habits since long ago. Thinking about my father-in-law's feelings made my heart ache. I can't imagine how much he loves his children. And finding out that he had been planning this divorce all along, I felt a bit relieved. I wanted my gentle father-in-law to lead a free life. I had always thought that when I saw my in-laws. Age has no bearing on life's choices, because my father-in-law should have a life of his own, and I was filled with gratitude towards my sister-in-law who helped me. I never thought she would consider so much for me. It made me realize once again how wonderful a family can be. I wanted to have a good relationship with my father-in-law in the future, so I wished to live with him. And I wanted him to interact with my daughter, his grandchild, who he hasn't seen much until now. It's a family restart from this age, but I want to make it the best life. When my father-in-law called me Lisa, I truly felt like we were family.
I always thought that being targeted for your life was something that only happened in dramas or comics. Never did I imagine that I'd actually find myself in such a situation. The events of that day are still etched in my mind, accompanied by a deep sense of fear. Today, I want to share the most sinister form of harassment I've experienced from my mother-in-law, or Mill for short. My name is Catherine. I'm 30 years old. I'm a homemaker taking care of my family. I live with my husband Tyler, who's a sales rep, and our 10-year-old son Lauren. I met Tyler 3 years ago through a mutual acquaintance at a company where I was working at the time. He's a good guy, previously married. Want to meet him? I was hesitant at first, being introduced to a divorced man with a child while I was single. But when I met Tyler and Lauren, they were both so genuine and adorable that I was completely smitten. Tyler and I hit it off immediately and got married within 6 months. Lauren quickly warmed up to me, and the three of us became a close-knit family. Weekend drives, family camping trips. For 3 years, every day was fulfilling. Finally, the moment we'd been waiting for arrived. Big news, you two! We're having a baby! Really? Thank you, Catherine. Is it a boy or a girl? It seemed like we're expecting a girl. I couldn't wait to hold my own child in my arms. Let's do our best together. I'm going to be a new mom again. I talked to my unborn child every day. Everything was going smoothly. I thought so, and never doubted it. Or so I thought, until my father-in-law, who had been seriously ill, passed away, and my mother-in-law started acting out. About 2 months after his passing, mother-in-law began summoning me to her home more frequently. Our apartment is only a 15-minute drive from her place, but being called over almost every day was stressful. Don't worry about coming every day. My legs should get better soon. Of course, mother-in-law. Let's get started. At that time, mother-in-law had injured her leg and was using a cane, even indoors. As her daughter-in-law, it was my role to help with errands and other chores. I didn't mind the work itself. I'm not one to shy away from physical labor. The problem was the constant complaints about Tyler's ex-wife while I was working. She was a terrible wife, always timid and inefficient. She couldn't cook to save her life. Meat was always tough and the soup was too spicy. Even her cleaning was sloppy. She couldn't even use a mop properly, let alone wring out a cloth. Her laundry skills were also lacking. She wouldn't hand wash items that needed it. The complaints were incessant and malicious. I had never explicitly asked why Tyler and his ex-wife divorced, but I wouldn't have been surprised if mother-in-law had something to do with it. My suspicions would soon become a reality. It was around the time I'd reached my 9th month of pregnancy, and my belly had grown quite large. I got a call from mother-in-law. "Would you like to have dinner together? Could you prepare my portion too?" At that time, it wasn't uncommon for the 4 of us to share meals. But that evening, I got an urgent message from Tyler.
"I'll be home late tonight. Go ahead and have dinner without me."
Mother-in-law was clearly displeased that she wouldn't get to see her grandson. "What's with this meat? It's so tough to chew. Did you buy the cheap stuff?" "Well, we can't always afford the best. And this soup tastes like water, worse than hospital food." I tried to keep the salt low. The atmosphere at the dinner table was terrible, thanks to mother-in-law's constant complaints. Lauren seemed quieter than usual, as if he wanted to finish eating and leave. After dinner, while I was doing the dishes, mother-in-law started whispering something from behind me.
"The bigger your belly gets, the further Tyler and Lauren drift away from me."
"Mother-in-law, is something wrong? He used to rely on me a lot right after the divorce. I'm sorry, I can't hear you well over the water." "Everyone's leaving me!" Mother-in-law, you're in the way. You're not needed." I turned around to see mother-in-law raising a frying pan. "Get lost, you worthless wife!"
"What are you doing?"
Tyler's shout stopped mother-in-law in her tracks.
"Stop it, Mom! What are you trying to do to Catherine?"
Tyler had come home just in time. I was so shocked that my legs gave out, and I collapsed. Memories from the past few months flooded back into my mind. It started around my 6th month of pregnancy. Mother-in-law began visiting our home more frequently, making me constantly on edge. I never knew when she might drop by unannounced. I couldn't afford any slip-ups or oversights in my housework. Even my clothing couldn't be too casual. It was a series of restless days. Most of the conversations with mother-in-law revolved around my pregnancy. "How's everything going? It's a girl, right? Is everything on track?" So far, so good. I'm keeping a close eye on my weight. I was initially glad she seemed so concerned. At first, I honestly thought so. But as time went on, her behavior became increasingly unsettling. I had been strictly advised by my obstetrician to avoid excessive sugar intake. Too high of blood sugar levels could affect the baby. I thought I had communicated this to my mother-in-law repeatedly. Yet, she would say, "Here are some sweets I brought, and I got some fruit. It was on sale." It was hard to refuse when she offered them with a smile. And every time I did refuse, explaining why, she'd get clearly upset. As my belly grew, mother-in-law's interference intensified. "I can do the cleaning. You should relax, Catherine." Such offers seemed helpful at first, but when I looked around the room after she left, wait, where's our photo from last year's trip? The whole frame is gone. Important items would go missing, and quite frequently. "Oh, sorry, Catherine. I broke another plate." "It's okay, mother-in-law. Are you hurt?" "I'll clean it up. Dishes and glasses would get broken." My distrust of mother-in-law grew stronger and more irrepressible. Naturally, I talked to Tyler about it. Do you think she doesn't like me deep down? I feel some hostility from her.
I'll subtly check it out. Sorry you have to go through this.
Thanks to Tyler, who was always on my side, I managed to get by. Around my 7th month of pregnancy, my belly had grown significantly, and the strain on my back was increasing. Despite this, mother-in-law started summoning me to her house frequently again. She'd make me do chores, citing her aching legs or bad stomach as reasons. Sometimes she'd even say she was going out with friends and needed me to handle the housework. If I tried to resist, saying I was also struggling, she'd get furious. Pregnancy isn't an illness. How cold-hearted. What a disappointment. Doing the chores, even if they were tough, was better than facing her wrath. While I was enduring and doing the housework, she'd say, "Why the sour face? I'm making you exercise for your own good." She claimed that lying around all day was bad for both the baby and me. I understood her point, but I wanted to do things at my own pace. Unable to argue or show my feelings, I went through truly difficult days. If chores extended into lunchtime, I'd eat at mother-in-law's house. Sometimes she'd prepare lunch for me. But when she did, "Here you go. It's just store-bought, but it's not bad." The food she served was clearly spoiled. If I didn't eat it or pointed out it was rotten, she'd scold me. "If you don't like it, don't eat it. After I went through all of the trouble of preparing it." She frowns and taunts me. No amount of apologizing would make her forgive me. During these tough times, Lauren was my emotional and physical support.
I can do the mopping for you. Bending over must be hard, right?
Thank you, Lauren. You're a lifesaver. Lauren was a perceptive and smart kid, always helping me out. The only one who wasn't fun was mother-in-law. She always tried to win her grandson over. "How about some candy?" "Never mind, Catherine." She tried to lure Lauren with juice or an interesting cartoon. But Lauren would say, "I'm good, don't worry about it." Then she'd say something cold. The colder she was to me, the more she was disliked by her grandson. Of course, Tyler was always on my side. Whenever he had a day off, he'd visit mother-in-law's house and scold her multiple times.
Stop making Catherine do all the work and feeding her spoiled food.
"I've never done such a thing. Tyler, you're being deceived."
What would Catherine gain from deceiving me? You're really losing it, Mom.
"Are you saying I have dementia or what?" And so the relationship between mother-in-law and us deteriorated day by day. Around my 8th month of pregnancy, when I was mentally and physically drained, a stranger approached me while I was shopping. "Excuse me, you're Tyler's wife, right?" "I'm actually his ex-wife." Unexpectedly, I was approached by Tyler's ex-wife. She said she had something to talk about, so we went to a nearby cafe. Just like mother-in-law had described, Sophia was a quiet and reserved person. But what she told me was unbelievable, completely opposite to her demeanor. "She tried to take my life." "What? She tried to kill you?" "By she, I mean mother-in-law, of course," Sophia said. She told me that she had faced various forms of harassment from mother-in-law while pregnant with Lauren. Being fed spoiled food, forced to do endless chores, and scolded if she resisted. It was a miracle that Lauren was born healthy in such a toxic environment. The harassment continued even after giving birth. I was treated like an intruder. Mother-in-law took Lauren away from Sophia and kept piling on the chores. Then one day, I felt a strong impact on my head and collapsed. A pot that was stored up high had fallen. That's what mother-in-law told the authorities. But I couldn't believe that was all there was to it. Sophia suspected mother-in-law had done something to her. Tyler couldn't change the situation. So Sophia, sensing danger, chose to divorce him. She left Lauren with Tyler due to her financial instability. Sophia repeatedly warned me to be cautious around mother-in-law. Please be careful. Take whatever precautions you can. Thank you for your concern. I'll do my best. When I told her how wonderfully Lauren had grown up, Sophia cried tears of joy. For her sake, too, I had to protect my family's well-being. I decided to take all necessary precautions. About a month later, that dreadful dinner happened. Tyler took the frying pan away from mother-in-law, who shook her head, saying, "I didn't do anything. I was just putting the pan away." That's when Lauren, hiding behind Tyler, glared at mother-in-law. "She's lying. I saw it. Grandma's lying." "I agree. It looked like you were trying to hit Catherine." "No, you're mistaken." "Shall we check then?" "Check? What do you mean?" I operated my phone and launched a special app. "What? This room is on camera?" I had cameras installed in the living room and kitchen. It was a precaution I took after Sophia's warning. When I played back the footage, there was mother-in-law trying to hit me with the frying pan. "Mom, explain yourself." Cornered, mother-in-law was now almost in tears. I was just jealous that you were taken away from me." Her reasoning was utterly selfish. She had hoped to live with Tyler again after his divorce, but was disappointed when he remarried so quickly. She felt robbed of the chance to have her son and grandson all to herself. Mother-in-law kept repeating these selfish claims. "How dare you come into our lives and steal everything?" Both Lauren and I felt disgusted by her words. Tyler's face turned red with anger. "How could you say that to my mom? Apologize. Apologize now." That day, after a heated argument, mother-in-law was kicked out of our house. Later, Tyler declared he would sever all ties with his mother. "I will never see Mom again, no matter what. And no financial support either." "Wait, please, I'm sorry. I've learned my lesson." It was no surprise that Tyler was furious. Part of his anger stemmed from the fact that I had told him everything Sophia had shared with me. Until then, Tyler had never thought his mother could harm Sophia. Realizing he had been wrong all along, he was visibly frustrated. "Don't ever show your face to us again. Got it?" With that final word, mother-in-law left, tears in her eyes. A few weeks later, I gave birth to a baby girl without any stress. Life has been peaceful, and we're enjoying our time with the newborn. As for mother-in-law, she seems to be struggling financially since losing her son's support. She's working part-time, but is reportedly having a hard time dealing with harassment from a younger manager. I heard this directly from mother-in-law when she called to ask for financial help. "Life is so hard for me right now. I'm barely getting by." "I understand, but we have our own expenses with raising a child." "Please, can't you help? Even $200 a month, or $100 if that's too much." "I'm sorry. I have to hang up now. Please don't call us again." Ignoring her pleas to wait, I ended the call and immediately blocked her number. After that, mother-in-law apparently took on more work. She's working mornings at a fast food restaurant and afternoons stocking shelves and working the cash register at a supermarket. I heard this from Sophia. When we met up recently, after a long time, I saw her at the supermarket by chance, and she looked so thin, like a different person, like a zombie. She didn't even notice Sophia standing right in front of her. If only mother-in-law had been kind, things wouldn't have come to this. It's a pitiful situation, but she brought it upon herself. I hope she reflects on her actions and finds a way to make it through life.
"No fooding, Mom collapsed," came the sudden message from my daughter Lily. I divorced a year ago, and my 7-year-old Lily was taken by my ex-wife Susan. I received a call from Lily saying that Susan had gotten terribly thin and was hospitalized. "Lily, what's going on? I send $2,000 every month. Why?" "Daddy, please help Mom." Hearing my daughter's heartbreaking cry, I left work early to rush to the hospital where Susan was admitted. Praying for their safety, I jumped into a taxi. When I arrived at the hospital, my crying daughter and my mother-in-law were there. Susan was lying in bed with her eyes closed as if she was asleep. "How is Susan, mother-in-law?" "It's a mess. Hospitalized for malnutrition. Bills are piling up."
"Malnutrition?"
"She said she was on a diet and hardly ate. I told her many times to eat more." I couldn't believe that she hadn't been eating properly until it came to this.
"Daddy, will Mom be okay?"
"Yes, she'll be fine. She'll rest in the hospital and we'll be back to normal soon."
"Really?"
I gently held my daughter, who clung to me, shedding quiet tears. A faint smile appeared on her face, perhaps comforted by my presence. Huh? Has Lily slimmed down too? I felt something was off when I held my daughter. "That's what kids are like in their growth spurt," said my mother-in-law.
"Is that so?"
I deeply regretted how ignorant I was on the well-being of Susan and my daughter. I was the cause of our divorce. Back then, I was a salesman in a major corporation, so busy I could hardly come home, leaving everything about the house and our daughter to Susan. I neglected my responsibilities as a husband and a father, which made Susan deeply upset that she asked for a divorce. My ex-wife and my daughter then moved back to her parents' home, where her father and stepmother lived. They got married late in life, saying, "It's fearsome and lonely to be alone in old age." Susan said, "I was worried about being a burden by returning with her child." But, to my relief, her parents welcomed her warmly. Out of my own will, I sent them $2,000 every month, hoping they live a comfortable life. Being too focused on work, I was the reason for our divorce, so I decided to do everything I can for the two of them. Our relationship after the divorce was not bad at all. At first, we often contacted each other, and I listened a lot about my daughter, who just started grade school. However, for the past 6 months, I've been so busy that I couldn't contact my ex-wife. I wonder what happened to Susan during this period. I was deep in thought as I looked at Susan, who was lying on the bed looking emaciated.
"Isn't this a bit too much for a diet? I wonder why she wanted to lose weight so much."
Well, who knows? Maybe she found someone she likes? She's still young after all. James, you can go home. I'll take care of Susan.
"I understand. I'll head home for today. Mother-in-law, it must be hard staying with her. How about you? Lily, come to my place."
"Huh? Really? I want to go."
As my daughter happily squeezed my hand, my mother-in-law immediately responded, "I'll take care of Lily here. You're busy with work, James, and Lily needs to go to school."
"But Lily says she wants to go. I can drop her off and pick her up from school."
"You're busy with work and it's difficult for you to take care of her. Plus, you don't even have custody over her." Her reasoning made me at a loss for words.
"I see. In that case, when she wakes up, could you ask Susan if she'll let me take care of Lily while she's hospitalized? Regardless of what you say, she's still my daughter."
Saying I'm sorry to my disappointed-looking daughter, I bowed to my mother-in-law and left the room. Looking back, I regretted not insisting on taking her home right then. Several days had passed since Susan was hospitalized. One day, after work, I returned home to find an unexpected sight. My daughter was there.
"Lily, did you come here all by yourself?"
"Daddy."
Looking up at me anxiously, Lily is wearing the same clothes as when I saw her at the hospital. A worn-out t-shirt, dirty shoes, and her hair, seemingly tied by herself, had grown out in a mess. This was it, the sense of discomfort I felt when we met in the hospital room. At the time, I was too consumed with Susan's collapse to notice, but realizing it now made me feel like a failure of a father. I invited my daughter into the house and offered her a cup of hot milk.
"Doesn't your mom buy you new clothes or shoes?"
"No, it's not like that."
Lily shook her head, appearing to struggle as she looked down.
"I've been working hard, sending money so you and Mom could live comfortably. Has it not been enough?"
"Dad, that's not it."
As Lily looked on the brink of tears, I gently stroked her back, waiting for her to gather her words. After a while, it seemed she had finally regained some composure as Lily took a deep breath.
"Grandma does mean things to me and Mom. She barely lets us eat."
"No way. Is that really true about Grandma?"
"It's true. I'm okay because I get lunch at school, but Mom's always hungry. That's why she collapsed. And you know, Grandma goes out every night, and when she comes back in the morning, she always badmouths me and Mom. Since living with Grandma, Mom has been treated like a servant every day."
Lily's words, shouted with her eyes full of tears, hit me like a punch in the gut. Could the mother-in-law be the cause of Susan's malnutrition? What on earth? If I had kept in contact, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Biting my lip in frustration and helplessness, I felt a small warm hand gently touch mine.
"Dad, don't cry."
My heart tightened as Lily smiled at me, bravely holding back her own tears. With that, I decided to help my ex-wife and daughter. About a week later, I was contacted by the hospital of Susan's scheduled discharge. Normally, the in-laws would have been the first to get contacted, but I had already arranged with the hospital to prevent that. I had grown suspicious toward my mother-in-law since she would always prevent me from seeing Susan and barely let me talk to her on my daily visitations. Moreover, she would constantly call me even when I had informed that Lily was staying with me, and hearing Lily's stories made me convinced that something was off with my mother-in-law. So I decided to take Susan directly to my house on the day of her discharge without letting my mother-in-law know. When Lily and I arrived at the hospital, there was Susan, thinner, but with a much better complexion than when she was admitted. "Thank you for coming to get me. I'm sorry for the trouble." Hearing Susan's voice properly after a long time made my heart beat faster. I'm so glad she's alive. Just as I breathed a sigh of relief, Lily rushed to hug her mother. "Mom, I'm so glad you're fine now." "Lily, I'm sorry for worrying you." As I watched their emotional reunion, I felt a lump in my throat, but I knew he wouldn't stick around for my mother-in-law to show up. I quickly ushered them into the car and headed home. It feels nostalgic. Susan seemed relieved as we arrived at the house we lived in together until a year ago. Watching for the right moment when she was calm, I broached the subject. "Actually, Lily told me something." When I asked Susan about the truth of what Lily had said, Susan's eyes widened and she averted her gaze awkwardly. What Lily said was true. After I divorced you and moved back home, my mother started treating me like a maid. Even when I started earning from work, my mother took all the money. There were even times she wouldn't let me eat because she said I didn't earn enough. "Why didn't you talk to me about it?" "How could you say that? I couldn't ask for help because I was the one who initiated the divorce. We hadn't been in touch recently, so I thought you'd found a new partner. I didn't want to interfere with that." "New partner? No way. Besides, didn't I transfer $2,000 to you every month? How did you fall sick?" "You're lying. I haven't received anything." "I am sure the money was transferred just fine. It should be recorded in your bank book." "My mother took both my bank book and debit card. She told me that you stopped sending money a long time ago and that you found a new woman and had abandoned me." I was stunned. If only I had kept in touch more diligently, this wouldn't have happened. But it's too late to regret it now. "She also took my credit cards and used them without my permission." "But couldn't you have run away?" "If I did that, then they would turn on my father, who was left at home. I can't leave my father alone." Susan choked up as she said this. My mother-in-law was a big spender, and when Susan and I were still married, she would often come to us asking for money. But she was generally a pleasant and kind person, so I believed Susan and Lily would get along with her. However, the moment Susan moved back home after the divorce, my mother-in-law seemed to have turned into a completely different person. She didn't do any housework and went out every day, taking her frustration out on Susan and Lily when she was out of money. My father-in-law is a quiet man who couldn't stand up to my mother-in-law, so he turned a blind eye to it. He didn't offer any help, and Susan just had to endure it. But I let Lily suffer. I'm a terrible mother, aren't I? "That's not true. The one at fault is entirely my mother-in-law." "I see. Thank you." With that, tears quietly ran down her cheeks. A few days later, I waited for the day my mother-in-law was out and headed to my in-laws' house. When I arrived at their place, my father-in-law apologetically bowed his head deeply to me. "I'm truly sorry. I've done an awful thing to Susan and Lily." "Sir, I've heard about what my mother-in-law has been doing to Susan and Lily. I came here to help them." Upon hearing my blunt declaration, my father-in-law gradually started speaking. "I noticed what she's been up to, but I turned a blind eye. I became unable to speak as I grew scared, seeing her change day by day. But I can't stand seeing my daughter and granddaughter get hurt anymore." From his gradually trembling voice, my father-in-law's regret was palpable. He wished for the same thing as I did, to protect both of them. "Sir, could you lend me a hand?" I asked him to keep an eye on my mother-in-law's behavior, where my mother-in-law heads out to, and what she's doing, how my $2,000 transfer was spent, and how Susan's credit card was used. Subsequently, I also began to investigate my mother-in-law. "Where the heck have you been? The hospital bills were expensive. God, you really are one hell of a burden." On a later day, I visited my in-laws' house with my ex-wife. As soon as Susan went in, I could hear a loud voice berating her. I quickly followed and entered my in-laws' house. "Pardon my intrusion. James?" Ignoring my surprised mother-in-law, I turned to my ex-wife and asked, "Are you all right?" Susan trembled in fear from being berated. Rubbing her back, I turned my gaze towards my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law froze for a moment, then hastily said, "Oh, welcome. What brings you here so unexpectedly?" "I just dropped off little Lily at school. Thought I could come over to discuss some matters regarding Susan and Lily without having Lily present. Hope I'm not intruding." Oh, a discussion? About what, I wonder? As you can see, we're getting along quite nicely. Saying that, my mother-in-law tapped on Susan's shoulder, to which Susan clearly showed her discomfort. Already seated on the living room sofa was my father-in-law. I pulled Susan close, sitting down nearby. I've been transferring money to Susan's account to help out even a little bit after our divorce. Is it true you are using up all the money? What? What money? I know nothing about it. Susan's probably trying to cover up her frivolous spending by blaming me. I wonder where the $2,000 every month is going. What a terrible daughter. As expected, my mother-in-law pretended not to know, even trying to shift the blame onto my ex-wife. She probably thought she could brush it off, but I exchanged a glance with my father-in-law, who quietly nodded. And from here, the reprisal begins. That's odd. You said the $2,000 every month, but you told Susan that I stopped sending out money and had abandoned her and our daughter, right? My mother-in-law started trembling as I spoke those words. That's what I heard from Susan. I didn't have control of my bank books or cards. You took them all. I couldn't possibly know about it. Besides, you've been using my credit card too, haven't you? I've received the receipts. What? What exactly have you been using Susan's credit card and the $2,000 you receive every month for, mother-in-law? To our question, my mother-in-law shakes her head, insisting she doesn't know. Of course we expected her to play dumb. In the midst of this, my father-in-law brings something out from the back of the room. Stop lying anymore. What do you mean? Do you suspect me as well? To my enraged mother-in-law, my father-in-law pulled out a few photos. So that's where you've been going every night. You seem to have a favorite host at the nightclub. It appears you've been having a grand time using James's money and Susan's credit card. How did you? My father-in-law and I looked into everything. Although we only had to follow you around, since you were so careless, we figured out everything without much deep investigation. What's wrong with using my daughter's money? I should be allowed that much. Furthermore, it seems that wasn't enough money for you. You've been tricking money out of widowed men like my father, almost akin to marriage fraud, haven't you? Shut up! It's the victim's fault for being fooled. As we presented the evidence, my mother-in-law brazenly shrugged it off. I thought this man had money when I married him, but it turns out he didn't have much. Luckily, my daughter Susan has been a great contributor, haha. Men at the local senior centers are so easy. All it takes is a soft voice to have them smitten. How naive. Hearing this, my father-in-law's jaw dropped to the ground. Susan and I were at a loss for words. We're calling the police. No, anything but that. At the mention of the police, my mother-in-law turned pale, but I went ahead and called them. Why would you call the police? This isn't looking good for me. So you're aware that what you've done is wrong. Just don't call the cops. I apologize for everything. Forgive me. Judging from your attitude, it seems like you've done this before. Don't worry, we'll have the police conduct a thorough investigation. My mother-in-law, pale-faced and shaking, was taken away by the police officers who arrived shortly after. When it was all over, it felt like a weight had been lifted off of our shoulders, and I gave Susan a warm smile. Then, with tears in her eyes, she gave me a gentle smile in return. Apparently, my mother-in-law was arrested on charges of marriage fraud, and it seems like several people are demanding her to repay their money. Naturally, my father-in-law divorced my mother-in-law. Furthermore, he sued her for the emotional distress inflicted on our family from her harassment. Susan also claimed $50,000 in damages for the misuse of her credit card. Of course, I'm also demanding her to return all the money I transferred. My mother-in-law, who is now behind bars, doesn't seem to have an easy life waiting for her once she's out. As for me, afterwards, Susan, please marry me again. This time, I'll protect you and our daughter. I won't make you cry anymore. We had once led a misguided marriage life, but this incident made me realize the importance of my ex-wife. Hearing my words, Susan cried, thanked me, and held my hand tightly. Now, our family is starting a new life. This time, I will protect this happiness thoroughly.